The first thing I did after discovering the truth was cancel our wedding venue deposit with my own signature. 6 months of planning, $150,000 of Emma's family money, and a guest list of 300 people all thrown away with a single phone call to Sunset Gardens. But that wasn't even the most shocking part of what I learned that day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special. For you, the betrayal started 3 weeks before our wedding when Emma approached me with what seemed like an innocent request. She wanted Ryan, my childhood best friend, to write her wedding speech, not help with it, not give suggestions, but actually write the entire thing from scratch. When I asked why, she gave me this sweet smile and said Ryan had such a way with words, and she wanted something truly memorable for our special day. She even laughed and said she was too nervous to write something worthy of our love story. Should have seen the red flags immediately. Emma had been an English major at UCLA, had run her own successful lifestyle blog for 3 years, and regularly posted thoughtful captions that got thousands of likes on social media. Writing had never been a weakness of hers. But I was so caught up in wedding preparations and my new promotion at Golden Gate Marketing that I barely questioned it. I figured she was just overwhelmed with all the planning details. What I discovered later was that this wasn't just about a wedding speech. This was the final piece of an elaborate scheme that had been in motion for over 2 years.
Ryan?
And our mutual friend Taylor had been systematically planning to destroy my life, steal my business connections, and leave me with nothing while they walked away with everything I had worked for. The truth came out in the most painful way possible during what was supposed to be our rehearsal dinner. I had arrived early to Hillcrest Country Club to check on the final arrangements when I overheard Emma, Ryan, and Taylor talking in the private dining room. They thought they were alone, but I was just outside the partially open door, holding the ring box I had planned to surprise Emma with during my speech. Emma was reading from a piece of paper, practicing what I now knew was the speech Ryan had written for her. But instead of romantic words about our future together, I heard her rehearsing a carefully crafted narrative about how I had manipulated her family's business connections for my own gain. She was practicing how to publicly accuse me of using our relationship to steal client information from her father's company and pass it to competitors. Ryan was coaching her on the timing, telling her exactly when to pause for dramatic effect, when to let her voice break with fake emotion, and how to make it seem like she had just discovered my supposed betrayal that very morning. Taylor was recording everything on her phone, apparently planning to live stream the whole humiliation for Emma's social media followers. The speech Ryan had written was a masterpiece of manipulation. It painted me as a gold digger who had pursued Emma not for love, but to gain access to her family's wealthy social circle. It detailed fake evidence of how I had allegedly been selling business secrets, complete with forged emails and manufactured financial records. The plan was for Emma to deliver this speech in front of all our family and friends, completely destroying my reputation and career in one devastating moment. But the worst part was listening to them laugh about how easy it had been to fool me. Emma giggled as she described how she had been feeding me false information about client meetings for months, setting me up to look guilty of corporate espionage. Ryan bragged about how he had been secretly documenting my work communications, twisting innocent conversations into evidence of wrongdoing. Taylor mentioned how she had already started spreading rumors about my character to mutual friends, preparing the ground for everyone to believe Emma's accusations. I learned that Ryan had been in love with Emma since college, long before I ever met her. When Emma and I got engaged, he couldn't handle the jealousy. Instead of moving on, he had spent 2 years convincing Emma that I wasn't worthy of her family's wealth and status. He had systematically poisoned her against me while presenting himself as the caring friend who only wanted what was best for her. The plan was brilliant in its cruelty. After Emma publicly humiliated me at our own wedding, she would call off the marriage and immediately start dating Ryan. Taylor would document their love story for social media, portraying Emma as a brave woman who had escaped a manipulative relationship and found true love with someone who had always been there for her. They had even planned how to split the wedding gifts and vendor deposits between them. What made it even more devastating was realizing how long they had been manipulating me. Every time Ryan had given me relationship advice, he was actually sabotaging my connection with Emma. Every time Taylor had suggested activities for our friend group, she was creating opportunities for Ryan to get closer to Emma. Every argument Emma and I had experienced in recent months had been carefully orchestrated by information they had planted. Standing there outside that door, holding the engagement ring I had planned to surprise her with, I felt my entire world collapse. The woman I loved, the friend I trusted more than my own brother, and someone I had considered family were all conspiring to destroy everything I had built. My career, my reputation, my financial security, and my faith in human relationships were all about to be sacrificed for their twisted idea of love and success. I quietly backed away from the door and left the country club without confronting them. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to protect myself from what was coming. As I drove through downtown Riverside that night, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life had been a carefully constructed lie. Emma had never loved me. Ryan had never been my friend. Taylor had never cared about anyone but herself. But I also realized something else as I sat in my car outside our shared apartment. Watching the lights in the windows where Emma was probably still practicing her speech, I wasn't going to let them destroy me without a fight. If Emma wanted to use our wedding as a stage for humiliation, I would give her a performance she would never forget. If Ryan thought he could steal my life by writing a speech, I would show him what words could really accomplish when used by someone who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I began planning my own speech. Not the romantic toast I had originally written, but something far more powerful. A goodbye that would expose their conspiracy, protect my reputation, and leave them facing the consequences of their betrayal. I had 6 days until the wedding, and I intended to use every single hour to craft the most devastating response they could never have anticipated. The days following my discovery became a masterclass in psychological warfare that I hadn't signed up for. Emma continued her performance as the loving fiancée with an Oscar-worthy consistency that made me question my own sanity. Every morning, she would wake up beside me, kiss my forehead, ask about wedding details, with such genuine enthusiasm that I began to wonder if I had imagined the entire conversation at Hillcrest Country Club. She would bring me coffee exactly how I liked it, laugh at my jokes during breakfast, and even initiated conversations about our honeymoon plans to Santorini. The woman who had been rehearsing my public destruction just days earlier was now cuddling with me on the couch while we watched Netflix, her head on my shoulder as she scrolled through vacation photos of Greek islands on her phone. Ryan's behavior became even more disturbing because of how calculated it was. He started showing up at our apartment almost daily under the guise of helping with last-minute wedding preparations. He would arrive with Emma's favorite pastries from the Blue Moon, calf, always remembering exactly how she liked her latte, with extra foam and a dash of cinnamon. When I pointed out that he seemed to know her preferences better than I did, he laughed it off and said he had been taking notes because he wanted to be the best man she deserved. He began inserting himself into every conversation Emma and I had about our future. When we discussed buying a house after the wedding, Ryan would immediately pull up real estate listings on his phone, offering to help us tour properties. When Emma mentioned wanting to start a family within the next few years, Ryan enthusiastically suggested he could be the godfather and started researching the best pediatricians in Riverside. His eagerness to be part of our life together would have seemed touching if I hadn't known. It was all part of his strategy to position himself as the better choice. The most unsettling part was watching how he manipulated Emma's emotions with surgical precision. He had studied her insecurities and triggers for years, and now he weaponized that knowledge against our relationship. When Emma expressed anxiety about the wedding budget, Ryan would casually mention how materialistic and shallow most expensive weddings were, subtly implying that I was pressuring her into overspending, and she worried about her dress fitting properly. He would reassure her, while making pointed comments about how the right partner would love her regardless of her appearance. Taylor's role became clearer as I watched their interactions more carefully. She functioned as the perfect supporting actress, always ready with the right comment at the right moment to reinforce whatever narrative Ryan was building. When Ryan suggested that Emma seemed stressed about wedding planning, Taylor would immediately agree and suggest that maybe Emma needed more supportive friends around her during this difficult time. When Ryan hinted that I was being controlling about guest list decisions, Taylor would nod sympathetically and share stories about other couples where one partner had been unreasonably demanding. She had been documenting our relationship for months under the pretense of creating a friendship scrapbook. Every time we went out together, Taylor would insist on taking photos and videos, claiming she wanted to capture all our memories before Emma and I got married and our friend dynamic changed. I now realized she had been building an archive of content to support whatever story they'd planned to tell after they destroyed me. The way they coordinated their manipulation was frighteningly sophisticated. They never directly criticized me or our relationship. Instead, they used a technique of planting seeds of doubt and letting Emma's own anxieties do the rest of the work. Ryan would mention an article he had read about successful marriages requiring certain compatibility factors. Then let Emma worry about whether we had those qualities. Taylor would share a story about a friend whose marriage failed because the couple had rushed into commitment, then watch Emma question our timeline. I started paying attention to how they communicated with each other when they thought I wasn't watching. They had developed an entire system of nonverbal cues and coded language. A raised eyebrow from Taylor would signal Ryan to change the subject. A specific hand gesture from Ryan would tell Taylor to distract me while he had a private moment with Emma. They would exchange meaningful glances across the room during conversations, clearly communicating about strategies I wasn't supposed to understand. The gaslighting became more intense as the wedding approached. Emma started questioning decisions we had made together months earlier, claiming she couldn't remember agreeing to certain choices. When I reminded her of conversations we had about the menu or the music, she would look confused and say that didn't sound like something she would have wanted. Ryan would immediately support her version of events, suggesting that maybe the stress of wedding planning was affecting my memory. They began creating situations designed to make me look bad in front of Emma. Ryan would offer to help with errands, then conveniently forget or mess up the tasks, leaving me to handle the consequences. When vendors called with problems, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Taylor would suggest group activities that she knew conflicted with my work schedule, then express disappointment when I couldn't participate, making it seem like I wasn't prioritizing our friendship or Emma's happiness. The financial manipulation was particularly clever. Emma started questioning expenses that we had already agreed upon, suddenly worried about money in ways that had never concerned her before. Ryan would offer to contribute financially to various wedding costs, positioning himself as more generous and supportive than me. When I pointed out that I was already covering my share of expenses, Emma would get defensive and accuse me of being ungrateful for Ryan's friendship. I watched them slowly isolate me from other friends and family members. They would plan gatherings without inviting me, then post photos on social media that made it look like I was antisocial or uninterested in spending time with people Emma cared about. When I asked why I hadn't been included, they would claim it was a last-minute decision, or that they assumed I would be too busy with work to join them. My relationship with Emma's family became strained as Ryan positioned himself as the considerate friend who always remembered birthdays and brought thoughtful gifts. He started calling Emma's parents directly to check on their health and offer assistance with various projects around their house. When I tried to do the same things, it looked like I was copying Ryan's gestures rather than being genuinely caring. The psychological pressure was exhausting. I found myself constantly second-guessing my own perceptions and memories. Every conversation felt like a minefield where the wrong word could trigger another round of manipulation and gaslighting. I started documenting our interactions in a private journal, writing down exactly what was said and when, because I was losing confidence in my own recollection of events. Emma's behavior toward me became increasingly hot and cold. One day she would be affectionate and excited about our future together. The next day she would be distant and critical about small things that had never bothered her before. When I asked what was wrong, she would claim nothing was bothering her, but her body language and tone suggested otherwise. Ryan and Taylor would exchange those meaningful glances again, clearly satisfied that their psychological warfare was working. The wedding preparations became a constant source of conflict, as they found new ways to undermine my input and make me appear difficult or unreasonable. Every suggestion I made was met with resistance or alternative proposals from Ryan that Emma inevitably preferred. When I tried to assert my opinion about anything related to our wedding, was labeled as controlling or unsupportive of Emma's vision. I realized they were conditioning Emma to see me as the problem in our relationship, while positioning Ryan as the solution to all her stress and unhappiness. Every negative emotion she experienced was subtly attributed to something I had done, or failed to do, while every positive moment was enhanced by Ryan's presence and support. They were rewriting the narrative of our entire relationship, making Emma question everything she thought she knew about love and compatibility. The most painful part was watching the woman I loved being manipulated by people she trusted. Emma wasn't evil or malicious by nature. She was being systematically brainwashed by individuals who understood her psychology well enough to exploit her vulnerabilities. Every doubt they planted, every insecurity they triggered, every moment of confusion they created was carefully designed to break down her resistance to their ultimate plan. As our wedding day approached, I could see the internal conflict in Emma's eyes. Part of her still loved me and wanted our marriage to succeed, but the constant manipulation was taking its toll on her ability to trust her own feelings. She would look at me sometimes with confusion, as if she couldn't reconcile the man she had fallen in love with 2 years ago. With the problematic partner Ryan and Taylor were convincing her I had become, I knew I was running out of time to save. Not just our relationship, but my entire future. In 5 days, they would execute their plan to destroy my reputation and steal my life. But I was no longer the naive man who had blindly trusted his closest friends. I was learning their techniques, understanding their strategies, and preparing my own response. If they wanted to play psychological games, I would show them what someone with nothing left to lose could accomplish when they finally decided to fight back. The morning of our wedding rehearsal arrived with devastating clarity. I woke up to find Emma already dressed in a pale pink sundress, applying lipstick in our bedroom mirror with unusual precision. She caught my reflection watching her and smiled, that radiant smile that had made me fall in love with her 3 years ago. For a moment, my heart ached with the possibility that I had been wrong about everything, that maybe the conspiracy I had uncovered was just my paranoid imagination running wild. That illusion shattered completely when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message contained a single photo attachment that made my blood run cold. It was a screenshot of a group chat between Emma, Ryan, and Taylor from just an hour earlier. The messages were discussing final preparations for what they called Operation Clean Slate and included detailed instructions about timing, camera angles for Taylor's livestream, and backup plans in case I tried to defend myself during Emma's speech. The most chilling part was Emma's message about how she had been practicing crying on cue and had even used eye drops the night before to perfect her devastated bride performance. She wrote about how she had studied videos of real victims sharing their stories to make her accusations more believable. Ryan had responded with heart emojis and told her she was going to win an Emmy for her performance. I stared at the phone screen until the words blurred together. Someone had sent me this information anonymously, which meant there was at least one person who knew about their plan and wanted to warn me. The thought that strangers could see through their deception, while I had been blind to it for months, made me feel simultaneously grateful and humiliated. Emma kissed my cheek and announced she was leaving early to get her hair done with Taylor and her sister Rebecca. She mentioned that Ryan would be picking up the rings from the jeweler and handling some last-minute coordination with the wedding photographer. Her voice carried that false brightness I had learned to recognize as her manipulation tone. She was already performing for an audience that didn't exist yet. 20 minutes after Emma left, I received another anonymous message, this time with an audio file attachment. My hand shook as I pressed play and heard Emma's voice coming through my phone speaker with crystal clarity. She was talking to someone on the phone, presumably Ryan, about how nervous she was getting about their plan. Her voice cracked with genuine emotion as she admitted she was terrified about destroying someone she had once genuinely cared about. But then Ryan's voice came through, calm and reassuring, reminding her about all the reasons I deserved what was coming. He methodically listed every perceived slight, every moment of jealousy he had harbored, every advantage he believed I had been given unfairly. He painted a picture of me as someone who had stolen opportunities that rightfully belonged to him, who had manipulated my way into Emma's life and her family's fortune. The conversation revealed the true depth of Ryan's resentment. He had been documenting every success in my career, every promotion, every client relationship, convincing himself that I had achieved everything through connections rather than merit. He had spent years building a case against me in his own mind, collecting evidence of my supposed wrongdoing that existed only in his twisted perception of reality. Emma's voice became stronger as Ryan continued his manipulation, her doubt transforming into conviction as he reminded her about the future they had planned together. They discussed their strategy for the months after the wedding, how they would handle the media attention, how they would rebuild their reputations while mine lay in ruins. Ryan had already secured a book deal to write about their survival story, and Emma had been promised her own reality show about overcoming betrayal and finding true love. The audio file lasted 47 minutes and contained enough evidence to destroy their credibility completely. But as I sat in our empty apartment listening to the woman I loved plot my destruction, I realized that exposing them wouldn't repair the damage they had already done to my heart and my ability to trust. The Emma on that recording wasn't the woman I had proposed to. She had become someone else entirely, someone capable of destroying another human being for money and fame.
Oh, my phone rang.
Startling me out of my thoughts. The caller ID showed Margaret, my mother, who was supposed to be arriving in town that afternoon for the wedding. Her voice sounded weak and strained when I answered, immediately triggering my protective instincts. Margaret explained that she had been feeling unwell for the past few days, but hadn't wanted to worry me before the wedding. She was experiencing chest pains and dizziness that were getting progressively worse. When I insisted she go to the emergency room immediately, she admitted she had already been to see her doctor that morning. The preliminary tests suggested she might be having heart problems that required immediate attention and possible surgery.
No.
The timing couldn't have been more devastating. My mother needed me, but she was also supposed to be walking me down the aisle tomorrow, since my father had passed away when I was 12. If Margaret couldn't attend the wedding, it would add another layer of emotional devastation to what was already shaping up to be the worst day of my life. I called Emma immediately to tell her about Margaret's health scare, expecting compassion and understanding. Instead, her response revealed another facet of the person she had become. Her first concern wasn't my mother's well-being, but how Margaret's absence would affect the wedding photos and the symmetry of the ceremony. She suggested we could ask one of her uncles to walk me down the aisle instead, treating my mother's medical emergency as a minor inconvenience rather than a family crisis. When I explained that I needed to drive to Los Angeles immediately to be with Margaret during her medical procedures, Emma's mask slipped completely. She accused me of being dramatic and using my mother's illness as an excuse to avoid wedding responsibilities. Her voice carried the cold calculation I had heard in the audio, recording as she suggested that maybe this was just another example of how I always made everything about myself. The conversation escalated when Emma demanded I stay in Riverside to handle wedding preparations while she sent Taylor to check on Margaret instead. When I refused and explained that my mother needed her son, not a stranger, Emma's response was to threaten calling off the wedding entirely if I abandoned my duties as the groom.
Gosh.
She claimed my priorities were all wrong, and that a real partner would trust her to handle the situation appropriately. I hung up on her mid-sentence and drove straight to Riverside General Hospital, where Margaret was being admitted for emergency testing. The 4-hour drive gave me time to process the complete collapse of everything I thought I knew about my life. My fiancée was planning to destroy me publicly. My best friend had been orchestrating our relationship's demise for years. And now my mother was facing a potentially life-threatening medical crisis. Margaret looked fragile and scared when I arrived at her hospital room. Doctors explained that she had suffered a minor heart attack and would need surgery to clear blocked arteries. The procedure was scheduled for the following morning, exactly when I was supposed to be saying my wedding vows to Emma. The irony wasn't lost on me that I would be choosing between supporting my mother through surgery and attending my own public humiliation. As I held Margaret's hand in that sterile hospital room, listening to the steady beep of her heart monitor. I made a decision that changed the trajectory of everything that followed. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I wasn't going to let Emma, Ryan, and Taylor destroy my reputation while my mother fought for her life. I wasn't going to stand silently while they executed their plan to steal my career and my future. I spent that night in the hospital chair beside Margaret's bed, writing the speech that would end my engagement and expose their conspiracy. Every word was carefully chosen to maximize impact while maintaining my dignity. I wasn't going to sink to their level of cruelty and manipulation. I was going to make sure everyone understood exactly who they really were underneath their masks of friendship and love. The speech began with gratitude for everyone who had come to celebrate what they believed was going to be the happiest day of my life. It thanked Emma for teaching me valuable lessons about recognizing deception and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who genuinely care about your well-being. It acknowledged Ryan for showing me that childhood friendships could evolve in unexpected directions and that sometimes the people closest to you could surprise you in ways you never anticipated. But then the speech took a different turn. It detailed the conspiracy I had uncovered, playing excerpts from the audio recordings I had received. I explained the systematic manipulation, the gaslighting, the financial schemes, and the elaborate plan to destroy my reputation for their personal gain. I provided evidence of their coordination, their lies, their complete disregard for the emotional devastation they were willing to cause. The final section of my speech was addressed directly to Emma, Ryan, and Taylor. I thanked them for showing me what I didn't want in my life. I wished them well in their future endeavors and hoped they would find the happiness they were seeking, just not at my expense. I announced that I was withdrawing from the wedding and from their lives, permanently effective immediately. As Margaret slept peacefully beside me, I finished writing the words that would set me free from 3 years of manipulation and betrayal. Tomorrow, while my mother underwent surgery to repair her heart, I would be repairing my own life by speaking the truth in front of everyone who had been invited to witness my destruction. Instead of being the victim of their elaborate scheme, I would become the author of my own liberation. The morning of what should have been my wedding day, I sat in the hospital cafeteria at 6 a.m., drinking bitter coffee and watching the sunrise through floor-to-ceiling windows. Margaret's surgery was scheduled for 8 a.m., and I had already spoken with the medical team about the procedure. Her prognosis was good, but I wouldn't leave her side until I knew she was safely through the operation. My phone had been buzzing constantly since 5 a.m. with increasingly frantic messages from Emma, Ryan, and Taylor. Emma's texts ranged from concerned to angry to desperate, asking where I was and demanding I return immediately to get ready for the ceremony. Ryan's messages were more calculated, suggesting that maybe I was having cold feet and needed someone to talk through my emotions. Taylor had sent several voice messages that sounded like she was on the verge of panic, talking about photographer schedules and guest arrival times. What they didn't know was that I had spent the early morning hours making strategic phone calls. 2 key people who would be attending the wedding. I contacted Emma's parents, my business colleagues, several mutual friends, and even the wedding photographer. I didn't reveal the full truth about what I had discovered, but I planted seeds of doubt and curiosity that would make them pay closer attention to what happened during the ceremony. I called Mr. Harrison, Emma's father, and had a carefully scripted conversation about some concerns I had about business conflicts of interest. I mentioned that I had learned some things about people in our social circle that might affect his company's reputation, and suggested he might want to be prepared for some surprising revelations at the wedding. He pressed for details, but I told him he would understand everything very soon. I reached out to Jessica, my colleague at Golden Gate Marketing, and asked her to bring a recording device to the wedding because I was planning to make an announcement that might be relevant to some ongoing business disputes. She was confused but agreed to help, especially when I mentioned that it could protect both of us from potential legal issues down the road. I contacted Professor Williams, my old marketing mentor, who was flying in from San Francisco for the wedding. I explained that I had uncovered some intellectual property theft related to campaign strategies we had developed together, and that I would be addressing it publicly at the reception. He immediately understood the implications and assured me he would be prepared to support whatever action I decided to take. Each conversation was carefully designed to create a network of allies who would be watching and listening when I delivered my speech. I wasn't just going to expose Emma, Ryan, and Taylor to a room full of unsuspecting wedding guests. I was going to reveal their conspiracy to people who had the power and knowledge to hold them accountable for their actions. At 7:30, I received a call from Dr. Martinez, the lead surgeon, explaining that Margaret's procedure would be delayed by an hour due to an emergency case. This actually worked in my favor because it meant I could attend the beginning of what was supposed to be my wedding ceremony and deliver my speech before returning to the hospital for Margaret's surgery. The drive from Los Angeles back to Riverside took exactly 2 hours, and I spent the entire journey listening to the audio recordings I had received anonymously. Each time I heard Emma's voice discussing how to make her fake tears more convincing, or Ryan's detailed explanation of how he planned to comfort her after my public humiliation, my resolve strengthened. These weren't people who deserved my forgiveness or my silence. I arrived at Sunset Gardens exactly 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The venue looked spectacular, decorated with white roses and golden accents that Emma had spent months selecting. 300 guests were already seated in elegant white chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an altar adorned with flowers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The irony of such beautiful surroundings being the backdrop for such an ugly betrayal wasn't lost on me. Emma was in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids and a team of photographers capturing her final preparations. Through the window, I could see her in her wedding dress, stunning creation that had cost $15,000 and required 3 fittings to achieve perfection. She looked radiant and nervous, playing her role as the blushing bride with convincing authenticity. Ryan was greeting guests near the entrance, wearing his custom tuxedo and a boutonniere that matched the groomsman's. He was charming and gracious, shaking hands with Emma's relatives and making small talk about how happy he was to be part of such a special day. Several people commented on what a wonderful friend he was to have helped with so many wedding preparations. I walked directly to the groom's preparation room, where my tuxedo was hanging exactly where I had left it 2 days earlier. I took my time getting dressed, checking my appearance in the mirror, and reviewing the speech I had written in Margaret's hospital room. Every word was memorized, every pause calculated for maximum impact. At exactly 11 a.m., the wedding coordinator knocked on my door to announce that it was time to take my position at the altar. I thanked her and walked out into the California sunshine, feeling strangely calm for someone about to detonate a bomb in the middle of his own wedding ceremony. The processional music began, and I watched Ryan escort Emma's grandmother to her seat in the front row. He was performing his duties as best man with visible pride, completely confident that his plan was about to reach its successful conclusion. Taylor followed, walking arm in arm with one of Emma's cousins, her phone discreetly positioned to begin recording at any moment. Emma's bridesmaids walked down the aisle in coordinated lavender dresses, each carrying bouquets of white peonies. Rebecca, Emma's sister and maid of honor, gave me an encouraging smile as she passed, completely unaware that she was about to witness her sister's complete moral collapse rather than her fairy tale wedding. Then the wedding march began, and Emma appeared at the back of the aisle on her father's arm. She looked absolutely breathtaking, her dress flowing behind her like something from a Hollywood movie. Her smile was radiant as she looked at me standing at the altar, and for just a moment, I felt a pang of genuine sadness for what we could have had if she had been the person I thought she was. The ceremony proceeded normally through the opening remarks and the exchange of vows that Emma and I had written together months earlier. She delivered her vows with tears in her eyes, promising to love and support me through all of life's challenges. The irony of her words, knowing what she had actually been planning, was almost too much to bear. When the officiant reached the part about exchanging rings, I deviated from the script for the first time. Instead of accepting the ring from Ryan, I pulled out my phone and connected it to the venue's sound system using the wireless adapter I had tested earlier that morning. The audio recording of Emma and Ryan's phone conversation began playing through speakers positioned throughout the venue. 300 guests heard Emma's voice discussing her nervousness about destroying me, followed by Ryan's detailed explanation of their conspiracy and their plans for capitalizing on my public humiliation. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Emma's face went completely white as she recognized her own voice coming through the speakers. Ryan started moving toward me, clearly intending to stop the recording, but several of my business colleagues blocked his path. Taylor dropped her phone and looked around frantically as if searching for an escape route. Emma's parents stood up from their seats in the front row, their faces showing confusion and growing horror as they processed what they were hearing. Mr. Harrison's expression transformed from bewilderment to fury as he realized his daughter had been planning to make false accusations about business dealings that could have destroyed his company's reputation. The recording continued for 12 minutes, documenting their entire conspiracy in Emma's own words. When it finished, the venue was completely silent, except for the sound of someone crying in the back row. Emma was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of terror and disbelief that her carefully constructed plan had been exposed so completely. I took the microphone from the officiant and began delivering the speech I had prepared. I thanked everyone for coming to witness what I hoped would be a valuable lesson about the importance of truth in relationships. I explained that while they had expected to see a wedding today, they were instead going to witness something much more rare and valuable: the complete exposure of a conspiracy designed to destroy an innocent person's life for personal gain. I detailed every aspect of their plan, from the manipulated business information to the fake evidence they had created to support Emma's accusations. I played additional audio clips that had been sent to me anonymously, including conversations where they discussed how to split the wedding gifts and how to manage the media attention they expected to receive from their victim's story. The speech lasted 20 minutes and concluded with my announcement that I was withdrawing from the wedding and from their lives permanently. I wished them well and hoped they would learn from this experience, but made it clear that I would be taking legal action to protect myself from any future attempts to damage my reputation or career. As I walked away from the altar and toward the exit, the venue erupted in chaos. Emma collapsed into her sister's arms. Ryan was being confronted by several angry guests, and Taylor was arguing with someone who was recording her with their phone. Emma's father was already on his phone, presumably calling his lawyers to discuss damage control for his business. I drove straight back to the hospital where Margaret was just being wheeled into surgery. I held her hand as the anesthesia took effect, and she whispered that she was proud of me for standing up for myself. The surgery took 4 hours and was completely successful. When Margaret woke up in recovery, the first thing she asked was whether I was okay. I told her I had never been better. The aftermath of my wedding day revelation spread through Riverside like wildfire. Within hours, videos of my speech were circulating on every social media platform, shared by guests who had recorded the entire confrontation on their phones. The hashtag #WeddingTruth was trending nationally by evening, with millions of people commenting on the audacity of Emma, Ryan, and Taylor's conspiracy. Emma's carefully planned victim narrative crumbled within days. The audio recordings I had played became evidence in multiple investigations, including a fraud inquiry launched by her father's business partners who were concerned about potential legal liability. Mr. Harrison's company stock dropped 12% in the first week as investors worried about the family's judgment and ethical standards. Ryan's dreams of literary fame evaporated when his publisher canceled the book deal after learning the true story behind his supposed survival narrative. His reputation in Riverside social circles was destroyed overnight, and several of his freelance writing clients terminated their contracts, citing concerns about his character and trustworthiness. Taylor faced the most immediate consequences when her employer, a prominent social media marketing firm, fired her for violating their ethics policy. Screenshots of her group chat messages with Emma and Ryan became exhibits in a harassment lawsuit. I filed against all three of them. Her carefully curated online presence, built around promoting authenticity and female empowerment, became a source of ridicule as people contrasted her public image with her private actions. The anonymous person who had sent me the evidence finally revealed themselves 2 weeks after the wedding. It was Rebecca, Emma's own sister, who had discovered the conspiracy while helping Emma prepare for the ceremony. Rebecca had found Ryan's detailed notes about their plan hidden in Emma's bedroom and had been horrified by the extent of their deception. She apologized for not warning me sooner, explaining that she had hoped Emma would come to her senses and call off the scheme voluntarily. Rebecca's revelation provided additional evidence for the legal proceedings I initiated against the trio. Her testimony about Emma's confession to fabricating evidence and Ryan's admission of emotional manipulation strengthened my case significantly. The courts awarded me substantial damages for defamation, emotional distress, and the business opportunities I had lost due to their conspiracy. Margaret's recovery became a source of strength that carried me through the difficult months of legal proceedings and public scrutiny. She returned home from the hospital with renewed vitality and became my closest confidant as I rebuilt my life. Her perspective on the situation was characteristically wise, pointing out that discovering their true nature before marriage had saved me from years of unhappiness and eventual divorce. My career flourished in ways I hadn't expected. Publicity from the wedding incident, while initially overwhelming, enhanced my professional reputation as someone with integrity who couldn't be manipulated or silenced. Golden Gate. Marketing promoted me to senior partner, and several new clients specifically requested to work with me because they had been impressed by my handling of the crisis. Professor Williams offered me an opportunity to co-author a book about recognizing manipulation in professional relationships, drawing from my experience to help others identify similar patterns of deception. The project became a bestseller and established me as a respected voice in business psychology and relationship dynamics. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I moved to a new apartment in downtown Riverside, close enough to visit Margaret regularly, but far enough from my old neighborhood to avoid constant reminders of Emma and Ryan. The space was modern and minimalist, reflecting my desire to start fresh without the emotional baggage of shared memories and compromised friendships. Dating was challenging initially because the story of my wedding day had made me somewhat recognizable around town. However, I eventually met Sarah, a veterinarian who had moved to Riverside from Portland, specifically because she wanted to escape her own complicated romantic history. We bonded over our shared experience of learning to trust again after betrayal, and our relationship developed slowly and authentically. Emma attempted to contact me several times in the first year, sending letters that alternated between apologies and justifications for her actions. She claimed that Ryan had manipulated her into participating in the conspiracy, and that her feelings for me has been genuine despite her willingness to destroy my reputation. I never responded to any of her communications, having learned that engaging with manipulative people only provided them with new opportunities to cause harm. Ryan left Riverside entirely, reportedly moving to Seattle, where he was attempting to rebuild his writing career under a different name. Mutual acquaintances mentioned that he had struggled with depression and substance abuse following the collapse of his plans. But I felt no sympathy for someone who had deliberately orchestrated such an elaborate scheme to hurt me. Taylor eventually found new employment with a smaller marketing firm in Los Angeles. Though her career never recovered to its previous trajectory, she had been forced to rebuild her professional network from scratch after the scandal. This made her unemployable in Riverside's close-knit business community. The experience taught me valuable lessons about recognizing authentic relationships versus performative ones. I learned to pay attention to people's actions over their words, to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, and to surround myself with individuals who supported my success rather than resenting it. 2 years later, Margaret walked me down the aisle at my actual wedding to Sarah. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended only by people whose loyalty and affection had been tested by time and proven genuine. There were no elaborate speeches or dramatic revelations, just quiet joy and the promise of a future built on honesty and mutual respect. As I looked out at our small gathering of true friends and family members, I reflected on how much stronger and wiser I had become through surviving Emma, Ryan, and Taylor's betrayal. Their conspiracy had been designed to destroy me, but instead it had freed me from toxic relationships and guided me toward the authentic life I was meant to live. The wedding speech that Ryan had written for Emma to deliver was meant to be my ending. Instead, it became my beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.